Spring Television. Ours it is.
Good evening and welcome to Spring Global and Western Spring Television. Now the headlines. APC Presidential Campaign Council seeks Atiku's arrest for alleged corruption. Italy's most wanted mafia boss arrested in Sicily after 30 years on the run. At least 19 people killed following bus and truck collision in northern Senegal. My name is Tunde Ido. The All Progressive Congress APC Presidential Campaign Council has asked law enforcement agencies to arrest and prosecute presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party (PDP), Atiku Abubakar, for alleged corruption. The campaign council premised its request on an audio recording released by Michael Achimugu, a former aide to Mr. Abubakar, last week. In the audio, the former vice president is alleged to have explained how organizations were set up to divert public funds. Addressing a news conference in Abuja today, spokesperson of the campaign council, Festus Keyamo, said Mr. Abubakar has a case to answer. Mr. Keyamo added that no harm must befall Mr. Achimugu and members of his family. Presidential candidate of the Labour Party, Peter Obi, today alluded to the presence of a small group of nepotistic politicians holding Nigeria captive for their interest. Mr. Obi made this comment during his opening address at Chatham House in London, saying the event was an opportunity to challenge Nigerians towards a new thinking. He spoke on the topic, Nigeria's 2023 elections, a vision for policy change and institutional reforms. According to him, the country is faced with an alarming insecurity that has led to the loss of many lives and property, a significant decline in food and economic output, immense mental trauma, and in some cases contributed to disaffection with the Nigerian project.
In line with my upbringing, especially my mother's counsel, my promise is that Nigerian resources will be most prudently used for Nigerians. And as Commander-in-Chief, I, Mr. Peter Obi, sincerely pledge that our path with Nigeria will be diligently pursued to create a new Nigeria characterized by sustained and inclusive growth and development for all. Thank you, and God bless all of you.
Nigerians have been urged to endeavor to use face masks given the current spread of COVID-19 globally. This comes as the World Health Organization issued an update recommending the use of face masks by the public in specific situations. We'll bring you full details of that report in our subsequent bulletin. Meanwhile, news outside Nigeria, Pakistan has launched its first nationwide anti-polio campaign for the year, aiming to immunize more than 44 million children under the age of 5 to protect them from the viral disease. The 3-day campaign started today in more than 150 districts of the country, which, along with Afghanistan, are the only 2 countries where the debilitating disease is still endemic. Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif yesterday formally inaugurated the campaign at an event in the capital, Islamabad, where he also administered polio drops to children. Sharif said a resurgence of the virus has raised global concern, including from the World Health Organization and other stakeholders. Elsewhere, Italy's most wanted mafia boss, Matteo Messina Denaro, has been arrested in Sicily after 30 years on the run. Messina Denaro was reportedly detained in a private clinic in Sicily's capital, Palermo, where he was receiving treatment for cancer. He is alleged to be a boss of the notorious Cosa Nostra Mafia, and he was tried and sentenced to life in jail in absentia in 2002 over numerous murders. More than 100 members of the armed forces were involved in his arrest. Italian media reported that Messina Denaro was captured just and taken to a secret location. He was reportedly visiting the clinic under a fake name for a course of chemotherapy. A video circulated by Italian media appears to show people standing in the street and applauding the Italian police as Messina Denaro is led away. Messina Denaro once boasted that he could fill a cemetery with his victims. Germany's defense minister Christine Lambrecht has resigned following a series of blunders and PR disasters. It comes as Berlin comes under rising pressure to allow the delivery of German-built battle tanks to Ukraine. Ms. Lambrecht was mocked for her announcement that Germany was supporting Ukraine by sending 5,000 military helmets. She was also widely criticized for failing to improve Germany's notoriously ill-equipped armed forces. This was despite the provision of 100 billion euros for that tax following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Still in Europe, the death toll from a weekend Russian missile strike on an apartment building in the southeastern Ukrainian city of Dnipro has risen to 40. Ukraine's national police reported that the victims from Saturday's strike on the multi-story residential tower included 2 children, and 15 children are among the 75 injured. The police said in a statement today that the rescue and search operation was ongoing, with 39 people, including 6 children, taken from the ruins so far. About 1,700 people lived in the apartment building. In a tweet, the European Union's foreign policy chief Joseph Borrell called the strike and others like it inhuman aggression because it directly targeted civilians. Asked about the strike today, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said the Russian military does not target residential buildings and suggested the Dnipro building was hit as a result of Ukrainian air defense action. In the meantime, the Kremlin has denied any conflict between Russia's defense ministry and the Wagner mercenary group, calling it an invention of the media. The tension between Wagner and the defense establishment was exposed last Friday when the ministry claimed to capture Soledar but did not mention Wagner's role in the fighting. Head of the mercenary group, Yevgeny Prigozhin, complained of attempts to minimize his forces' role and belittle their achievement. The defense ministry later issued an update praising the courageous and selfless actions of Wagner fighters. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov told reporters that it was unhelpful for pro-Russian media to take part in media manipulations about an alleged rift. Meanwhile, in the United States, Republicans have accused President Joe Biden of hypocrisy following the discovery of more classified documents at his Delaware home. Nebraska Congressman Don Bacon told ABC that anyone who lives in a glass house should not throw stones. At least 20 documents related to Mr. Biden's time as vice president have been found at his private residence and at an office he used in Washington. He criticized Donald Trump when his home was raided for classified files. By law, all White House files should be handed over to the National Archives at the end of a presidency. The special counsel is now investigating.
I do. I think the American people see how President Trump's been treated on one hand, and they want to see a sense of fairness. Granted, the situations are different, but they're both about classified information being in areas that's illegal and the improper handling of highly classified information. So I think it shows a sense of fairness to have a special counsel for both.
And you acknowledge these?
Well, I agree that they are different. In one case, you have long-term negotiations where President Trump was not handing over the information. And then you have, on the other hand, classified information that's been stored for 6 years in one area where Chinese nationals have access, another where it's in a garage. Who knows who had access to that? And the third batch was in the president's home in Delaware. I would just say they're both wrong. Granted, they're different. What strikes me, though, is having President Biden being highly critical of President Trump, calling him irresponsible. And it just reminds me of that old adage, if you live in a glass house, do not throw stones. And I think President Biden was caught throwing stones.
You're watching Spring Global on Western Spring Television. We'll be right back after this break.
is a culture on its own. It has its own language, its own people with their own way of life. The world of sports is never void of actions, stories, dramas, and scandals. I guess you need a sports show that can walk the walk and talk the talk.
On this show, we answer all your sporting questions. The whens, the whys, the wheres, and even the what ifs. Sports Spring is that show that will give you that new lease of life you've been looking for in sports journalism. Join me, Joseph Atewe,
And your sports Amazon, Nengi Ernest.
on this station, Western Spring Television, channel 190, only on Star Times.
Let's talk sports. Let's speak the most universal language of the world.
Thank you for joining us. You're welcome back. Now back to the story we brought to you earlier. Nigerians have been urged to endeavor to use face masks given the current spread of COVID-19 globally. This comes as the World Health Organization issued an update recommending the use of face masks by the public in specific situations. Olayinka Ale completes the story.
The COVID-19 pandemic, also known as the coronavirus pandemic, is an ongoing global pandemic of coronavirus disease caused by several acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus 2 as part of a continuous process of reviewing COVID-19 response, treatment and management. The World Health Organization, WHO, has said that nose masks continue to be a key tool against COVID-19 and continues to recommend the use of masks by the public in specific situations. In a new update, the WHO recommends use of masks irrespective of the local epidemiological situation, given the current spread of the COVID-19 globally. The WHO also updated its guidelines on mask wearing in community settings, including treatment, patient care, and clinical management. The President Association of Resident Doctors, Uniosun Teaching Hospital Chapter, Oshogbo, Dr. John Ojo, has admonished the residents of Osun State to cultivate the habit of using a nose mask, especially when they are in a crowded environment. Dr. Ojo also advised those who were recently treated of the disease to maintain a proper hygiene so as to avoid a reoccurrence.
So there are a lot of new recommendations now concerning COVID-19, and there are a lot of people at risk of getting infected, and in a way to reduce the spread of this disease of COVID-19, it's been advised that people continue to use their face masks. They continue to use their face masks, especially people that recently had COVID-19 infection or recently contacted virus. They are advised to continue using their face masks. People, when you're in a crowded place, it's also advised that you continue to use your face masks to reduce or minimize the spread of the disease.
The Senior Registrar, Department of Family Medicine, Uniosun Teaching Hospital, Oshogbo, Dr. Oluwatosin Adewale, advised Nigerians to stay safe at this period, harping on the need for them to use a nose mask so as to prevent the outburst of the virus in Nigeria.
There's a new wave coming again, and we as a group of people, we as Nigerians, we should do all that is necessary for us to stay safe during this period. So it's better for us to avoid crowded areas, wear our nose mask all the time, especially if you find yourself in a crowded place unavoidably. Try to wear your nose mask. You do yourself a lot of good. You protect yourself from the virus, because it's not going to show on your face. It's not going to, until you're affected and you're coming down with the sickness. So prevention, they say, is always better than cure. So just try, use your nose mask if you're outside, you're outdoors. Avoid crowded areas. This is very, very important. The virus is airborne, so it tends to spread in droplets, and there's no way to guard against that unless you avoid crowded areas.
Mr. Abdulwasir Oladele Azan, a health practitioner, has also implored Nigerians to take proactive measures in tackling the reoccurrence of COVID-19 in the country. He stated that wearing the nose mask and rubbing the hand sanitizer will go a long way in preventing the outbreak.
With the current thing that is happening in China, we need to be taking proactive measure before it's come down to us, before we know it again. So it's very, very essential to put on the mask, at least for ourselves, and to prevent spreading it. As the thing the number of, as human beings, we exchange a lot of microorganisms within ourselves, but the number we exchange will be reduced when we use nose masks, from protecting spreading of one microorganism or the other, especially the Omicron variants of COVID-19 that has just broken up in China. So we need to be proactive, as I said earlier, and use it. It's not difficult for us, and with time, we get used to it.
Dr. Aderunke Afolabi, in a word, said it is expedient for everyone to start wearing their nose mask so as to prevent the lockdown that was experienced in 2020.
Recently, we now have a new surge in the cases of COVID-19. It is expedient that everybody start using their nose mask so that we won't have a lockdown like the last time, and we won't have a sit at home like the last time, and we won't record the number of death rates and then everybody that was infected of COVID just like 2020. So it is important that everybody wear a nose mask and also start practicing washing of hands and every other necessary things to prevent the spread of this virus.
Meanwhile, Nigeria recorded 29 fresh COVID-19 cases in the last 1 week, according to the Nigeria Center for Disease Control and Prevention. Olayinka Ali, Western.
At least 19 people have been killed and 24 others injured in northern Senegal when a bus and a truck collided. A colonel with the National Firefighting Service said the accident in the early hours of today occurred near Sakal in the Louga region. The state-owned Le Soleil publication reported that the bus collided with a truck on the number 2 National Road as it swerved to avoid running over an animal. It added that the injured were taken to a regional hospital. President Macky Sall sent heartfelt condolences to the families of those killed in the accident, adding that the incident shows the need to strengthen road safety measures in the West African country. The accident came just 8 days after Senegal was plunged into mourning following the collision of 2 buses in the early morning of January 8th in the central region of Kaffrine, leaving 40 people dead and more than 100 injured. Elsewhere, the pilots of the flight that crashed in Nepal did not report anything untoward as the plane approached the airport. A spokesman, Anup Josehi, said the mountains were clear and visibility was good, adding that there was a light wind and no issue with weather. There were 72 passengers and crew aboard the Yeti Airlines flight from Kathmandu to the tourist town of Pokhara, which crashed on Sunday. No one is believed to have survived in the country's deadliest plane crash in 30 years. Today, fragments of the Yeti Airline plane were scattered across the riverbanks on both sides like pieces of a broken toy. An Iranian American imprisoned in Iran has started a 7-day hunger strike and appealed to United States President Joe Biden to bring him home. Simiak Namazi made the plea today in a letter to Mr. Biden on the 7th anniversary of the release of 5 U.S. citizens in a prison exchange with Iran. This was designed to coincide with the implementation of the 2015 Iran nuclear deal. Namazi was arrested in October 2015 on charges of trying to overthrow the state, accusation Namazi denies. His father, Bokar, who traveled to Iran in 2016 out of concern for his detained son, had also been arrested on espionage-related charges and released 2 years later but banned from traveling. He was finally allowed to leave Iran in October for medical treatment. Namazi said in his letter he will be on a hunger strike for 7 days, asking Mr. Biden to spend 1 minute a day for the next week thinking about the suffering of U.S. citizens detained in Iran. When asked for comment, a White House National Security Council spokesperson said the government was committed to securing Namaz's freedom. Germany police say they have removed almost all climate activists from a German village that will be destroyed to allow the expansion of a coal mine. Hundreds of officers cleared around 300 activists from Lützerath in an operation that began last Wednesday. Activists waited in tree houses a day after clashes broke out between both sides. Police added that 2 people were still holding out in an underground tunnel at the site in western Germany. Police said 35 tree structures and almost 30 wooden constructions had also been cleared away. Climate activists had protested that the village and others nearby should not be demolished and the coal under them near an open cast brown coal mine should be left in the ground. In the Middle East, Afghan police says former Afghan lawmaker and her bodyguard have been shot dead at her home in the capital, Kabul. 32-year-old Mossal Nabizada was one of the few female lawmakers who stayed in Kabul after the Taliban seized power in August 2021. Her brother and a second security guard were wounded in the attack yesterday. Former colleagues praised Ms. Nabizada as a fearless champion for Afghanistan who turned down a chance to leave the country. Kabul police spokesman Khalid Zadran said security forces have started a serious investigation into the incident. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has cancelled plans to attend the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, over the ongoing energy crisis in this country. The country is facing its biggest ever power crisis, with people experiencing rolling blackouts of up to 6 hours a day. Mr. Ramaphosa was due to lead a government delegation to the event, but the presidential spokesman, Vincent Magwenya, said Ramaphosa will instead hold talks with leaders of political parties and the state-run power company, Eskom. Shakhtar Donetsk President Rinat Akhmetov has pledged to donate 22 million pounds to the Ukrainian war effort following the transfer of Mikhailo Modric to Chelsea. The Premier League side signed Modric from Shakhtar yesterday in a deal worth up to 89 million pounds, a transfer record for Ukrainian football. Akhmetov said the money will help a project named Heart of Azovstal, aimed at helping Mariupol defenders and the families of fallen soldiers. Ukraine was invaded by Russia in 2022. And to tennis, home favourite Nick Kyrgios pulled out of the Australian Open with a knee injury the day before he was scheduled to play his opening match. The Wimbledon runner-up said he was devastated he could not play in Melbourne. Seeded 19th, Kyrgios was set to play Russia's Roman Safiliuin tomorrow.
You know, I know you guys will all be wondering, what's going on. So physio Will here has been with me throughout my career, and he's been monitoring me pretty closely the last week, and he's going to give you more of the details on what's kind of going on. And obviously I'm just exhausted from everything, and obviously pretty brutal. One of the most important tournaments of my career, and so it hasn't been easy at all.
Yeah, it has been a pretty interrupted and difficult lead into the Australian Open, unfortunately, and during the last week or so, Nick's experienced some discomfort in his knee and routine MRI just to make sure everything was okay. There's a parameniscal cyst growing in his lateral meniscus, which is a result of a small tear in his lateral meniscus.
Before we end Spring Global, here is a recap of our top stories. The All Progressive Congress APC Presidential Campaign Council has asked law enforcement agencies to arrest and prosecute presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party (PDP), Atiku Abubakar, for alleged corruption. Italy's most wanted mafia boss Matteo Messina Denaro has been arrested in Sicily after 30 years on the run. At least 19 people have been killed and 24 others injured in northern Senegal when a bus and a truck collided. You can follow us on our social media handles on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Western Spring Television. You can also watch us live on our YouTube channel at Western Spring Television. Thank you most sincerely for viewing. On behalf of the entire transmission team, my name is Tunde Ido. Good evening.